Hello, my dear student. Welcome to another edition of your mathematics lesson. Today, in continuation with your main topic, that is arithmetic of finance. What we are going to discuss today is a sales tax. So let's begin. After completing the very lesson today, my dear student, will be able to explain the term sales tax, and number two, you also be able to solve problems involving sales tax. These are the two things I hope my dear student will be able to do after completing the very lesson today. So as usual in your favorite segment of the lesson, that is maths is funny. Today, my dear student, I'll give you another special group of numbers. This group of numbers are called grafting numbers. I will explain what are grafting numbers and give you examples of those grafting numbers after completing my lesson today. So don't go away. To begin the lesson, my dear student, let me first explain the term sales tax. So sales tax is the tax paid on sales of goods, services. And it is usually included in the customer's total cost. That is the total cost of the goods or the total cost of the services. What you now paid as a consumer of that very goods or of that very service, what you now paid, you should know that there is a tax inside that price, that money you paid. And the manufacturer or the service provider will now take that part of the tax and remit it to the government. So whatever you paid and collect whatever goods, you should know that the money you paid there is a sales tax inside that money. Sales tax is usually percentage of the total of the cost of the item. So the cost of the item simply here refers to the cost to the manufacturer or cost as far as the service provider is concerned. What amount it cost him for that very goods is what we refer to here, cost of the item. And it's usually calculated using this simple formula. Sales tax equals to sales tax rate, that is this percentage which is usually given in the question, multiplied by the cost of the item, that is the cost to the manufacturer or cost to the service provider. So total cost is now given by this simple formula. Sales tax, you now add the cost of the item. I repeat, cost of the item is now cost as far as the manufacturer is concerned. So when you add his cost and the sales tax, it now gives you the total cost. This is the consumer's cost. Similarly, if you want to find the cost of the item, but what you have is the total cost and the sales tax. So you can simply subtract the sales tax from the total cost. This formula is basically the one above. Only we now shift the sales tax to the left hand side where it will now change to minus. So the cost of the item will now be given by this simple formula, total cost minus the tax that is now based on the sales. Similarly, you can now find this cost of the item using another formula, that is total cost divided by 1 plus the sales tax rate. If what you have in the question is the sales tax rate and the total cost, you can equally use this very formula and find the cost of the item. All this for now find them very vital, very useful while answering questions. So let's just move and take examples. Example number one, it says given that the sales tax rate is 3.5%, the question asked here is to find the sales tax or a carton of duplicating paper that cost 15,000 naira. This 15,000 naira is the cost as far as the manufacturer is concerned. Solution to this very problem. So what we now do, we now write the formula for calculating sales tax. Sales tax we now said is now given by this formula, sales tax rate multiplied by the cost of the item. The sales tax rate is given as 3.5%, and the cost of the item is given in this question as 15,000 naira. So substituting it there, if that is done correctly, you now have 3.5 over 100 multiplied by 15,000. And doing this multiplication correctly gives answer 525 naira. This will now be the amount of money that will be added on this 15,000 and is what a consumer will now paid and collected that carton of duplicating paper. So let us move and take another example. Example number 2 says a photographer who charges all his customers, including tax, is to prepare a bill for a family photos which cost 25,000 naira. So this 25,000 naira is the cost of his services. But in writing the bill to the customer, he will now include the tax that he usually pay the government. So that tax will now be added to this 25,000 naira. That is his cost. So the question asked here, how much must he write on the bill if the sales tax rate is 5%? Solution to this very problem. So what we now do, let's see. It says the total cost of that very item. That is the amount that he's going to write on his bill. Will now be given by the formula sales tax plus the cost of the item. The cost of the item, I repeat, is this 25,000 naira. That is the cost of his services in this case, plus the sales tax, that the amount that he is going to pay the government, which is 5% of this his amount. That will now be the total, is what is now going to write on the bill, is what the customer is now going to pay and collect those family photos. So let's just move. So the sales tax is now given by this formula, that is sales tax rate multiplied by the cost of the item. Then I copied this cost of the item. So what is in the bracket is the formula for calculating the sales tax. So let me just substitute. Then I'm going to have 5% times 25,000. This will now give the sales tax. Then plus the cost of the item, 25,000 naira. So simplifying this, you now have 5 times 250. That is these two zeros in 100. Cancelling these two zeros, you now have 250 times this very 5 is what I have here. Then I copied my 25,000 naira. So multiplying 5 by 250 gives answer 1,250. Then plus the 25,000 naira. Addition of this correctly gives answer 26,250 naira. So this is what the photographer will now write as a bill to his customer. So customer is now going to pay this and collect the photos, while the photographer would now pay the government this very amount, 1,250, as his service tax. Let's just move and take one more example. Example number 3 says that the best superstores include 7% sales tax in the cost of all items. So this is a superstore that sells commodities, and what they usually do, they add on each and every price of the item, they included the 7% sales tax. So the question says a customer paid a total of 790 naira for a packet of detergent. Then the question asked how much sales tax does this to send to the government for this sale. So when they make a sale of this packet of detergent in which a customer paid this and collected 790 naira, inside this money 790 there is a tax inside which the store will now pay the government. So the question asked here, what amount as a tax will this store pay the government as a result of selling this packet of detergent that cost 790 naira? So solution to this very problem, the formula for calculating sales tax, remember, is this simple one: total cost, which is the 790, minus cost of the item, which is not given in the question. We don't have cost of the item in the question. This is the total cost of that very item, that is cost to the consumer. So what do we now do? We have to get this cost of the item. We have to get this cost of the item. Remember, we have written one formula last where if you want to find cost of the item, but what is given is the total cost and the tax rate, you make use of this simple formula. Remember it. Cost of the item equals to total cost divided by 1 plus the sales tax. So this is the sales tax. We have the tax rate. Look at it. Sales tax rate, 7%. So I have this, I have the total cost. So I can use this very formula to find cost of the item. There, after getting it, I will now come back to this and substitute. So let's just move. The total cost is now 790 divided by 1 plus the sales tax rate is 7%. So I have 7 over 100. So simplifying this, 7 divided by 100 gives you 0.07. Added to this one, it gives you 1.07. So I'm going to have 790 divided by 1.07. And this division, if it's done correctly, you now have the 738 naira 0.32 kobo. So I now have the cost of the item. So let me just go back and substitute here to find the sales tax. So this will now be given by 790. That is the total cost, which is here. minus the cost of the item, which we have just calculated here, 738 naira 32 kobo. So subtracting this correctly from 790 gives result 51 naira 68 kobo. So this is the tax that will now be paid to the government as a result of just selling this one packet of detergent. With these examples, my dear student, I have come to the end of this very lesson. I hope you find it resourceful. And let me just move quickly to the last segment and explain what are grafting in numbers. So these are numbers whose square root always start with exactly the same digit as the number itself. That is, if a number is grafted, if you are to find it is square root, the result you have, that is the square root of that very number. The very first digits there in the square root will now be exactly the same digit that you have in your original number. But let's take examples of grafting numbers. Example of one of them is 98. 98 is a grafting number. 9,990 is another grafting number. If these are grafting numbers, if I find the square root of 98, for example, if you use your calculator to find the square root, what I expect to get in the result, the very first two digits will now be 9 and 8. Let me find out and see. So square root of 98 will now be 9.89994. It continues like that. Is an irrational number. If you look at the first two digits in the result, 9 and 8, this gives you 98. So 98 is a grafted number. Let me take the second one. 9,990. If you are to find it a square root with your calculator, what we expect to have in the result, the very first four digit must be 9998 in that sequence. So use your calculator to find the square root. If you did correctly, you now have 99.98999. If you take the very first four digits there, 999 and 8, they are exactly the same arrangement of digits you have in this very number. Other examples, 99 is a grafting number, 9,999 is another grafting number, and some other numbers. These are grafting numbers, and with this I have come to the end of this very lesson. We see more of these interesting things in mathematics in our subsequent lessons. Thank you for your attention.